Hello, welcome back to video 12 of our evaluation series. And in this video, actually the retake of this video, I want to cover basically overlapping network support and really what that means. And when we say that, overlapping network support, we literally mean that if you had a, say, 10 network and you were to acquire a company and they had a network of about 10, and you had different subnets, different hosts, different ways of subnetting that information, you would then have an overlap. And what we try to do here, or allow to do, is to set in using the container structure in the hierarchy as the way of separating overlapping network space so that it can be defined at a container level and then beneath it. And then you can go to a peer type container or something else outside of that hierarchy and recreate that same 10 or other networks and repeat the process. So what I wanted to go through here, I'd already kind of gone through some steps of cloning the containers and setting this up, so you're going to see the effect of everything I'd already done. But I had gone through and basically through the container maintenance, we need to set up some type of hierarchical structure that delineates where these overlapping blocks will be. So as a general rule, network space flows downward, starting at the container it's defined in. If I define a 10/8 in control and I try to create another 10/8 in org A, that would be an overlap. It's not permitted. If I go down one level to organization A, I can create a 10 network here, define it as an overlap, and then another organization with its own 10 or other private public networks and set those to overlap. Once you have a container structure, and again, what I did is I just basically cloned each of these container structures because I wasn't importing them here for another organization, but to mimic some of that and keep the same policies. So I had cloned everything so that if I go through my site templates and try to do some allocations, it'll still work in these new organizations. And effectively then, when you take a look at that 10 network, so in org A, my initial 10, there's now this checkbox. So I went ahead and I created it and set it up as a overlap. And this one by default already is using the internal network space for the in-adder ARPA. So when we looked at the DNS related to it, it's using the in-adder ARPA within the internal space. And if I go down to organization B and take a look at its network, we now have an overlapping checkbox here. So now these two networks are independent of each other and can be networked and subnetted any way that you see fit that's appropriate for those networks. Now you can do this with public addresses. You can do this with IPv4 and IPv6. There isn't any distinguishing reason not to do any of those. Now in terms of the support for this then, one of the things that we had gone then to is I had applied the regional container. So by copying and cloning the policies, everything just works as is. All the site containers, everything. And then say going down to the site and then adding the site container for that branch, everything works as is as well. So that's kind of how you can model the overlap. And then the idea here then is that you can set up different levels of administration, give them access to their organizational level, and then they would manage all of their networks and subnets and IPs within their space. Whether or not they see the other organizations is entirely up to your support model. If you have an overlapping support model for everything, you may want to set permissions to allow for both. However, when you start dealing with networks, you want to ensure that anyone in that network level who's going to be start looking at networks and managing networks understands this concept of overlap. And so what I had also done here, when you first default to these networks, it uses the 1010, whatever the name is and the size as the name. And to help you see this and to model it through the other views of the tool, I suggested going in and set up the block name. And I did one here like org B 10/8. Over here I did org A 10/8. And the reason I did this is so that under the subnet block view, when we see overlapping blocks, you'll see them hierarchically and who their organization is. Some way of delineating from a navigation standpoint. So that way any views will show effectively that information in an overlap, and we could do the same with the 192.168. We could even do it with a part of it, maybe down to a subnet, to a network serial interface, even down to any IP address effectively. So there's no limitation to what we can do as long as it's on a boundary basis and follows the standard addressing plants. So that was my block type video. This is actually half of what I had before. And I hope this helps you understand the overlapping. If you're in the process of acquisitions and mergers, which there is quite a bit going on, think of it that way. Think of it as lab environments. If you need to model network space, you may need to set up an overlap. So those are a few things to keep in mind. And now, since we've also introduced overlaps, we've also added one more level of complexity, given the nature of overlapping networks. So when we start to deal with importing and exporting of data and using APIs and identifying these overlaps, we now need to use the container as the identifying source. So we can specify the full qualified container or the portion of the container that identifies the site and its overlapping block. And that's how we'll start doing this if we get into the APIs, which we will here shortly to do that. So that's all I wanted to do with the block type, overlapping blocks. I'm going to finish this up, and then the next video, I'm going to, again, go back through just the remaining kind of menu items, touch on just about everything left, and I'm going to end up on the callouts and the events and endpoints, which is going to naturally lead us into the CAA as we start talking about endpoints and how those work. So join me again in the next video, and we'll see you there. Thank you.